Thank you for being willing to serve as an acolyte at Christ Episcopal Church. This video is designed to help you remember what to do. This is the credence table. First you have the main stack. We also have the cruet filled with water. Next, the lava bowl and the towel. And then we have the service book. And then lastly, the Eucharistic Visitor's Kit. There is also a second chalice. The acolyte should arrive at least 15 minutes before the service. Wash your hands and vest in a white alb. A cincture is tied around the waist, and a red ribbon cross hung around the neck. 10 minutes before the service, the acolyte enters the sacristy, washes hands with Purell, and begins the candle lighting. The acolyte lights the candle lighter and places the match in the ashtray, and enters the sanctuary on the side closest to the credence table. Always, on entering and leaving the sanctuary, the acolyte makes sure the door is closed, softly if possible. The prayer book does not suggest an order for lighting candles. At Christ Church, the following is the preferred order: the Paschal candle, used during Easter, baptisms, and memorial services. Light the candle on the lectern side of the altar. Cross in front of the altar with a small bow toward the altar, and light the Gospel candle. Move behind the altar and cross, no bow this time, to light the candle on the wall to the right of the reredos. Cross behind the altar, light the candle on the wall to the left of the reredos. Again, it is not necessary to bow when crossing behind the altar. Extinguishing the lighter flame, the acolyte exits on the left, back into the sacristy, and then hangs the lighter on the wall. The acolyte now returns to the sanctuary, removes the processional cross, exits back into the sacristy, closing the door both ways, and carries the cross around the church to the entry doors to wait for the processional to begin. The acolyte should speak with the Eucharistic minister before the service and ask if there are any special duties during the service. The acolyte assists in greeting the congregation as they arrive. At a signal from a choir member or priest, the acolyte raises the cross high and walks slowly down the aisle, pausing at the altar before turning to the left, and carries the cross to the stand on the left side of the altar. Passing behind the altar, do not bow. The acolyte arrives at the bench next to the credence table and remains standing as the processional is completed. The acolyte participates in the worship service, singing hymns and following the service bulletin. At the peace, the acolyte joins the altar party coming down the steps and greets the congregation. During the prayers and thanksgiving following the peace, the acolyte returns to the bench and sits facing the congregation. Immediately after the priest says the offertory sentence, the deacon or Eucharistic minister will begin to set the table. The acolyte brings the stack, which is the chalice, the paten, covered with the burse and the veil, and sets it on the corporal in the center. The open back, unveiled side faces the reredos. As the deacon or Eucharistic minister begins to unpack the stack, the acolyte brings the service book with stand to the altar and places it on the side. As the deacon or Eucharistic minister gestures for the ushers to bring the offering of money, bread and wine forward, the acolyte removes the stopper and brings the water cruet from the credence table, carrying it in the right hand and waiting by the side of the altar. When the deacon or Eucharistic minister is ready to receive the cruet, bow or nod slightly on handing it to the deacon or EM. When the table is set, the priest comes to the altar for the hand washing. Hold the unstoppered water cruet in your right hand, the lavabo bowl in your left, with the towel over your left wrist. As the priest places his or her fingers on the bowl, pour a small amount of water over the fingers and allow the priest to dry the hands on the towel. Return the water cruet bowl and towel to the credence table. The acolyte returns to stand by the altar. During the Eucharistic prayer, the acolyte stands close to the side of the altar, facing it with hands joined at waist level. Make the sign of the cross with your right hand and bow whenever the priest does. The priest will serve the congregation before serving the altar party. The acolyte places the offering under the credence table while the congregation is being served. When the congregation has finished receiving communion, the acolyte returns to the altar to stand with the altar party and receive communion. Stand close to the altar in a semicircle. Each will pass the bread and wine to the next person using the words of administration: the body of Christ, the bread of heaven, and for the wine, the blood of Christ, the cup of salvation. The deacon or EM will clear the table. The EM will hand the acolyte the wine cruet to place on the credence table. The EM will remove the extra chalice to the credence table. The Eucharistic minister will replace the stack directly on the credence table. The acolyte will then take the Eucharistic visitor's kit and place it on the table. The altar party stands around the altar, as during the Eucharistic prayer, and joins the congregation in sending out of the Eucharistic visitors. The acolyte stays by the altar during the blessing, then returns to the bench, remaining standing for the beginning of the recessional hymn. After the recessional hymn begins, the acolyte crosses the altar and picks up the processional cross. Holding the cross, the acolyte waits until the second verse of the hymn is started and then moves to the center front of the altar, pausing briefly before walking slowly back down the aisle to the doors of the church. The acolyte remains at the back of the church for the dismissal, then leaves the church, going around to the sacristy and into the sanctuary to return the cross to its stand. The acolyte then extinguishes the candles in the reverse order they were lit. If the paschal candle is present, it is always extinguished last. The acolyte then returns the alb, cincture, and cross to the acolyte wardrobe in the parish hall. Please check with the senior acolyte for any suggestions or comments. Again, we really appreciate your ministry and your participation and leadership of the worship of Christ Church. You are God's beloved child. May God bless you.